Will the Oscars finally stop being so racist? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Bill Whittle Now is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And Bill, there is a task force that has been working for many months to develop, a few months, let's say, to develop new standards for what picture can qualify for the Best Picture Academy Award starting in about 2024. Of course, they're going to give the film industry time to catch up with these standards. And here it is. The film must meet at least two standards across four categories: on-screen representation, themes and narratives, creative leadership and project team, industry access and opportunities, and audience development. Now, within each category, there are a variety of criteria involving the inclusion of people in underrepresented groups, including women, people of color, LGBTQT plus people, and those with cognitive or physical disabilities. This comes to us from the Los Angeles Times. Bill, the industry in your backyard seems to have finally found a way to stop being so racist, and that is by being forced into representing underrepresented people in order to get an award.
It's pretty much the end of Castaway, isn't it?
Or the film 1917, or The Irishman, or a variety of other films.
Yeah. Which I suppose this edict came from the Ministry of Culture.
I'll check the exact name of the Ministry of Culture. Let's see.
So here's the thing, Scotty.
It was the Academy Aperture 2025 initiative.
Oh, perfect. AI, Minister of Culture.
They're widening the aperture.
Here's the thing about this. The first time I ever heard the term virtue signaling, it just instantly, it's why it's such a great term. It's one of those terms that just, you hear it for the first time, there's not a speck of question in your mind about what it's about, and it's about a fairly complex dynamic. It's been my experience watching this phenomenon for quite a while now, that the more insecure you are, the louder you have to virtue signal. That's just a general rule. And on top of this, you have to layer in the overpowering Marxism, well, it's getting to be the same thing, narcissism of people in show business. When you take the narcissism of people in show business and you combine it with the insecurity of people in show business, and I'm speaking from experience here, you end up with this perfect storm of virtue signaling where there is nothing that you are not willing to do in order to get the applause and the approval that you seek. And while obviously a lot of this is coming as a result of the whole George Floyd thing and Black Lives Matter and so on, I suspect on some level as well, a large driver of this kind of thing is the absolute panic that Hollywood is in, especially stars, because they haven't been out with their, in their gowns for 6 months now, 7 months, something like that.
In their gowns?
And this, yeah, out on the town in their gowns, looking fabulous. I just stepped out of the house, and now I'm here at, at whatever restaurant. And so when the pandemic started, we saw just a flurry of movie stars getting on YouTube to help the regular people get through this crisis, and God bless them. We don't know what we would have done, frankly, as a nation without Gal Gadot and the rest of those people singing Imagine There's No Heaven as people were dying left and right.
I know, I've been comforted by seeing celebrities in sweatpants.
Yeah, and that's another thing, by the way. It's another thing. If they'd had any wisdom, so that answers itself already. If celebrities had had any wisdom, or their agents or anybody else, instead of trying to keep them in front of the public eye by having them do things like podcasts from home and so on, they should have gone in just the exact opposite route. They should have just disappeared. And people would start missing them. But the real serious mistake that all of these people made was they started doing podcasts from home, and we got a chance to see them without the makeup, without the writers, without the lighting, without the editing, without the sweetening, and all of the other things that make a TV star or a movie star into a movie star. And seeing them without those things made us realize, in the case of Madonna especially, that she's not only just sitting, I mean, just the idea of Madonna in a video she did at the beginning of the pandemic, sitting in a bathtub of milk with flowers strewn across the surface, as we all do at the end of a busy day.
As one does.
As one is wont to do. But when you hear them speak and talk about things, and hear Madonna talk about how it's just terrible being stuck in this $12 million mansion. I think the thing that is most disturbing to Hollywood is the idea that the pandemic has shown the American people that we don't need them, and furthermore, we don't particularly like them, and so since they live in this kind of ideological bubble, they've figured out collectively that the thing that they have to do is to show Americans that Hollywood celebrities are leading the way in terms of moral virtue. And if you've ever been over the hill and know how that business works, moral virtue is not the primary attribute I would assign to the people in show business.
And there's been a longstanding practice in Hollywood to make it seem that way, though. There's a great podcast series called "You Must Remember This" by this woman who is a kind of an expert on the history of Hollywood, and she often talks about public relations efforts to make it look like debased and debauched Hollywood stars were, Ward and June Cleaver.
That's true. But what was different about those days, as opposed to these days, were while there were certainly a fair amount of debauchery going on. I almost went with a different word. What was also happening in the Hollywood of, let's say, the 40s, just for the sake of it, was not. It's true. Agents were suppressing stories about illicit love affairs and divorced women and all the rest of that. But on the other hand, at the same time, you had guys like Jimmy Stewart, who was one of the most successful, popular, and highly paid celebrities in the world, simply walk away from Hollywood, join the Army Air Corps, and fly combat missions, and serious combat missions, not like a publicity tour combat mission. And you saw a lot of celebrities doing this. You saw a lot of actors doing that. You saw people pulling all across the board. And so the actual virtue, as opposed to the signaled virtue, was much greater in Hollywood. And that's why Hollywood was beloved by people. And Hollywood is like a gut-shot animal that's been staggering through the woods for 40 years now, just animated by the goodwill that it had accumulated over the course of 20, 30, 40 years, and which they continue to dissipate as they bleed out every day.
And unlike most businesses, that goodwill is still out there because you can watch their movies from the 40s anytime you want. So here's how the Oscars deal is going to work, starting again with the 96th Oscar Awards in 2024. So we've got a few years to wait. And by the way, this does not apply to anything but the Best Picture category. Okay. So this is only for Best Picture. There are a series of 4 different standards, and within each one of these standards, there are criterion. In Standard A, you've got to meet one of the criterion. In Standard B, you've got to meet one. In Standard C, you've got to meet both of them. And by the way, those are paid apprenticeship and internship opportunities, as well as training opportunities and skills development, all around the idea of representing underrepresented groups. And then in Standard D, which is audience develop, you must meet this criterion of basically trying to reach out to a broadly diverse audience. But it's really
What do you mean by develop? Do you mean educate those ignorant savages? Is that basically what they're talking about?
On Standard D, for audience development, that's marketing, advertising, public relations.
Okay, but when they talk about developing the audience, are they talking about growing market share, or are they talking about messages that will enhance our lives?
Well, it's a little bit of that and a little bit more. The studio and/or film company has multiple in-house senior executives from among the following underrepresented groups. Must include individuals from underrepresented racial or ethnic groups on their marketing, publicity, or distribution team. So it's not really what they do to reach out to the audience, it's who's doing it.
Yeah, this is great news. I'm genuinely happy to hear this. I can't think of anything that would accelerate the destruction of the entertainment business as we know it than this. This is a godsend, because this will utterly destroy what's left of Hollywood in the same way that AB 5, another California invention that basically eliminates the entire idea of a private contractor, has eliminated all those jobs as well. So the beautiful thing about this, Scott, is if you think about what they're saying, then they're saying that the only movies that will have a chance to win Best Picture will be movies that were written by committee and supervised by a committee of a number of people whose entire job, it's salary, reputation, and continued employment, is making sure that what they represent gets into the film. Then you will have scripts that are written by people who are determined to make sure, rather than making an emotional statement with impact, their primary concern will be to write a script that doesn't offend anybody. And I cannot imagine a more restrictive or repulsive environment to work in as a writer than this, and they deserve it. This is exactly what they deserve, and this is what they're going to get. I've said before, and I will say again, I would not be the slightest bit surprised at all. Well, first of all, I can tell you this. The chance of a black actor getting the Best Actor award next year is 100%. We don't even know who the actors are yet, but it's 100%. And so what they're basically doing by making these carve-outs, so to speak, is they are in essence creating a Best Black Actor award. And that is such a tremendous, disgusting, disgraceful insult to black actors that they all should be ashamed of themselves. You know, I've been a huge fan of Booker T. Washington my entire life. I'm doing a 7-part history series, another one of these series like Cold War and Apollo 11 on America's Forgotten Heroes. And right now I'm doing the research on Booker T. Washington. And everything about him would have been offended to the core at this. And the conclusion I came to reach, Scott, this is actually worth the candle here. Booker T. Washington had the belief that black people had to basically form their own communities, educate themselves, start their own businesses, enter white society as equals, paying for jobs and services, and just come in as respected equals who managed to pull themselves up. On the other side was W.E.B. Du Bois, who said, no, have white America give us, the talented tenth of the black community, the money, and we'll distribute it, and so on. And the reason that I wanted to talk about that is this. Booker T. Washington's approach was harder than W.E.B. Du Bois's. It was harder because blacks would have to work harder, but the real reason it was harder was that it was harder on white racists. And the reason I say that is because if Black America had done what Booker T. Washington shown was possible, then white racists would have had to accept them as equals. But what the Democrats have done is they've gone from owning slaves to owning dependents. They're no longer slaves. Now they're dependents. They're children. They need our help. They need the help of white, rich, progressive liberals in order to help raise them up. And where would they be without it? And the attraction of that is that it allows you to keep your racism. It allows you to basically say, if it weren't for white liberals doing things like ensuring that representation and certain numbers, and we have an advocate, we have this, if it wasn't for us doing this, black actors wouldn't have a chance. But in point of fact, what you find is that the best black actors are as good as the best white actors are. And it's an insult to them. It's an insult to them. And it cheapens the award in the same way that affirmative action cheapens a college degree. If it turns out that somebody like Denzel Washington, an extraordinary actor, wins a movie, or a movie that he's in wins Best Picture, how is Denzel Washington and the rest of the black cast in a hypothetical movie, how are they going to know for sure that they made the Best Picture possible? How are they going to know? And furthermore, how is everybody else going to know? How is everybody else going to know that it was, in fact, the Best Picture rather than the Best Picture that met all these criteria? And if you can't see the difference between these two things, you got a problem.
Let's finish up with Standard A, which is on-screen representation, themes, and narratives. And just to give you the highlights of this rather detailed series of guidelines here, to achieve Standard A, the film must meet at least one of the following criteria. Number 1, lead or significant supporting actors from underrepresented groups. Number 2, a general ensemble cast that's at least 30% from minority groups. That's in secondary and minor roles. Number 3, the main storyline or subject matter is centered on an underrepresented group. Bill, I guess the question that occurs to me is, does a large part of Hollywood just basically say, like they've said for years, we don't want people interfering with our creativity, screw the Oscars, we're walking away?
That was the argument made against the Hays Commission and censorship. That's the attitude that every artist of any integrity has had for his or her entire life. That's the attitude of many filmmakers in Germany and the Soviet Union who simply refused to make the movies that the state told them to make or committed suicide. That's the attitude of people whose art is more important to them than their career. And all of this, we know what causes it. We know we don't need to go into that. We don't need to go into why Hollywood is doing this. We all know the answer to that too. Let's just look at the outcome of this as a close here. What this means is that Hollywood's trend of making safe, boring, patronizing, stupid films is going to be greatly accelerated by this set of restrictions, because everybody's going to be going for the golden statue, and they'll do whatever they have to get the golden statue, because the people on the other side of that hill worship that little graven image the way that the Israelites did while Moses was up on the mountain. And so they will do anything to get this statue, and so will the studios. And so what that means is Hollywood's descent not into oblivion, although that'll follow. Hollywood's descent into it's like the heat death of the universe. You know what I mean? There's the entropy. It's like nothing is warmer than anything else. Nothing has higher temperature. There's no energy flow. Everything is made out of the same temperature pablum. And that means, and the good news is, that means that it will accelerate Hollywood as a cultural influence on America. And since it has always been, always, even in the 20s and 30s when these communists were writing scripts and so on, and that means that this pernicious experience will go away and entertainment won't go away. Entertainment will suddenly be in the hands of people with a $1,000 camera and $500 worth of editing equipment on a $3,000 PC, and they'll be able to make movies of the same visual quality that Hollywood is able to. No one's going to theaters anymore. We're all watching it at home anyway, and that means that entertainment will go back into the hands of the people who are the most talented. That's the way it was before movies, because before movies, everybody was on stage in plays, and you didn't need $200 million to put on a play. You need close to that to do it on Broadway, but to simply write a play that was worth seeing, hire actors that were good, and get audiences to come and pay is not a terribly expensive experience when you're dealing with plays. Movies, the entire invention of movies, the technology, the studios, the lights that you needed, the laboratories, development, cameras, sound guys, all of it was a period in human history where for about 100 years on or off, round in there, entertainment was in the hands of people who was ultimately in the hands of millionaire businessmen. And this is simply accelerating the decline of that abnormal period, and I welcome it with open arms.
Well, as we wrap up here, I'm just wondering that if in 2024, the Oscar for Best Picture, the Oscar statue, it kind of stands with its ankles together, standing straight up, if perhaps the 2024 Oscar for Best Picture will have a leg up. The members at BillWhittle.com.
I can guarantee you that the features on the Oscar, the broad shoulders, narrow hips, stronger cheekbones, I guarantee you that statue will either quickly or slowly be morphed into something much, much more androgynous, and that's going to happen in the near future too.
We want to thank the members of BillWhittle.com who have made this program possible. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.